The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country, where we like to extend our minds to what is happening in the world around us and how each and every one of us is making a tangible difference to better this country's living standards and environment in harmony. We are super smart, ambitious, driven and persistent breed of people that have chosen to live and have the privilege to be born in COVID-free paradise, that we live daily with nature, that people pay megabucks to do for only 10 days. As John Clark would say, aka Fred Dagg, we don't know how lucky we are. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, and for the past decade, I have had the pleasure of carving a corner in the rural media room with a soapbox that many seem to be gathering around, growing week on week, thanks to the wonderful partnership with Farmers Weekly I cherish deeply. The pleasure that is all mine is having had conversations a decade ago with politicians and industry leaders that's heads were certainly in a far different sphere on things that they are today. And I have also seen farmers get more motivated to take a stand on the matters that matter most. You know, sure, it may take a crisis of record low wool prices or being backed into a corner of blanketing forest plantations to storm the steps of Parliament. But New Zealand, we are far too bloody humble. You know, rural New Zealand harness the squeaky wheel better. Still not good enough. Sorry, rural New Zealand, it does try to harness the squeaky wheel better, but it's still not good enough. We can be doing better. Today, a farmer who had enough was South Otago sheep farmer Amy Blakely on the steps of Parliament, with many of the wool industry taking her petition, with over 15,000 signatures she gathered, asking the government to please use wool carpets in their government buildings. What are you frustrated with, and what can you do about it, rather than complaining? I challenge you to be bolder in your frustration and take the ram by the horns to plant the seed for our future generations. We wouldn't be where we are today if our past generations didn't do that for us. Thought of the day. Now let's keep moving, rural New Zealand, regardless of the government of the day at the end of September, not because the country is reliant on us, but because we all have the individual power of influence to place one brick in front of another to create a path for others behind us. Joel, I've been thinking, I've got something I want to pave a path forward on. Really left field, but you've got used to that by now. Why can't we have hologram music concerts?
Yes, this classic agriculture topic. Holograms at festivals.
Just because we're one of the only countries in the world that can gather in groups of any size, why do we have to miss out on international music acts?
That's honestly not the worst idea I've heard. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just thinking about it. I was listening to music as I always do, writing my script for the show just beforehand and, you know, sort of pining for some international Nashville artists. But of course, you know, I'm not poo-hooing local New Zealand acts. Ticket prices could be cheaper because they don't need to cover the massive riders or the, you know, 737 plane just carrying the drum kit. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it honestly could be pretty good for New Zealand artists for the next wee while because, you know, we can have gigs here and no one else is going to come into the big slots, I don't think. So, yeah, they could be getting a lot more headlining acts.
Absolutely. Rhythm and Vines in Gisborne, you've been a part of, Joel. I mean, do you think they're going to take a bit of a punt and try and hook and book some international acts or holograms? Or just stick to that New Zealand lineup?
I think they're going for a mix and saying I was a part of it. You know, I worked at it. Maybe a part of it's...
You're an essential part. You're an essential service.
Essential service.
Rhythm and Vines.
No, I think they've got a few international people on the headline, but I think they're going to quarantine them for a few weeks before they do the show. I don't know how they're working it, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, should we charge them for that? I'd love to hear from our awesome community that are watching us live across 15 different channels on social media and on websites sarahperriam.com and farmersweekly.co.nz. Just click on the Sarah's Country tab. What international artist, dead or alive, would you buy a ticket to see as a hologram? I know this sounds really left field, but I love actually getting to know the audience better, and I want to see what the music taste of this audience is. Personally, if you know me well, I think a Kip Moore, Miranda Lambert headline concert via hologram would be me right now. No, let's crack into our lineup tonight on Serious Country. After 7:20, Mike Hosking has snarled that no one's going to leave Air New Zealand and work in the dairy industry. Well, and the great investigative journalist that she is, Annette Scott at Farmers Weekly, has uncovered one of them. From serving lattes in an airport lounge to milking cows on a Mid Canterbury dairy farm, Nikayla Knight has been recently redeployed with Richard and Tammy McDonald, 880 cow unit heading straight into calving. Richard is going to join us to share his thoughts on what it's like to employ outside of the industry and the patience that we need to share to be good employers. 29 years since the Resource Management Act was set to revolutionise sustainable development, it has been described as too slow and hasn't protected the environment at all. After 7:30, Vice President for Federated Farmers, Karen Williams, will join us to explain what the new 2 regulations are going to look like and what they will mean for landowners. She has been poring over this with her great policy team at Federated Farmers and is happy to take your questions. 3 of the world's biggest economies are being naughty little monkeys, failing to live up to their commitments under the CPTPP trade agreements to increase access to their consumer markets for imports of our New Zealand dairy products. Dairy Companies Association of New Zealand Executive Director Kimberly Clothier will explain more towards the end of the show and shine light on the real ongoing problem in the European Union trade deals where we are still squabbling over the name of cheese. First up in Serious Country, after the break, the huge skill shortages leave the door wide open for young people or any people of that matter interested in studying subjects related to land use change, including soil science and plant biology. And, of course, universities should be pouncing on this. I know, broadcasting from Lincoln University, they certainly are. Principal Scientist for Plant and Food Research, Brent Clothier, is the President-elect for Rural Society Te Aparangi, an organisation that supports New Zealanders to explore, discover and share knowledge. Brent is going to join us after the break to analyse his mission in his new role, the first for a scientist of agricultural background since the early 80s. This is Serious Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell compound to leave it 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Good to see some comments starting to roll in. Sean O'Neill has joined us. Welcome, sir. We're talking, of course, about hologram music concerts. Random, but you talk about food or music and it gets you going in the comments. I have worked that out, or Marmite versus Vegemite, but we're not doing that tonight, Joel. So who would you like to see in hologram, dead or alive, in concert? Of course, this is a mission I want to drive. Why do we have to miss out on concerts of international acts here in COVID-free paradise of New Zealand? Of course, Dolly Parton would be up on my list. Joel, dead. She's not dead, but Joel, who's a dead singer that you'd like to see in concert? Jimi Hendrix.
Who, sorry?
Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, Jimi Hendrix. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I was taking my headphones off.
Oh, goodness.
I wouldn't mind seeing Jimi Hendrix. That would be pretty cool.
Led Zeppelin, The Doors. Oh.
Are they dead?
Okay, moving on with the show. With more than 40 years' experience and 300 published papers to his name, Dr. Brent Clothier has seen a lot of change in New Zealand's science and research circles. Not all of it good. Today, there might be shortages of skilled scientists in many disciplines, including soil and water science, his own area of expertise. But Brent says the opportunities are increasing. It's just a matter of attracting people to areas that offer exciting and stable futures. Well, following Colin Willis-Croft's story in Farmers Weekly, this week's Newsmaker section, Brent joins us now from, I understand, your gorgeous beach house in Foxton. Can you just, as we were talking there in the break, shared about how you pivoted your living situations over COVID lockdown?
Kia ora tātou, Sarah. Not Foxton Beach.
My apologies. It's like Waihi and Waihi Beach.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so my wife and I decided to lock down at the beach. It provides lots of opportunities for surfing, for walking on the beach with our dogs. And it turns out once with the lockdown levels went down, it's only a 35-minute commute to work, and I'm the only car on the road virtually.
Oh, that's brilliant. Absolutely. So you concur with me that we definitely live in paradise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now
we could make good economy out of our paradise.
Oh, and I'm looking forward to hearing that. New president-elect of the Royal Society, Te Āparangi. Firstly, could we get some background on the organisation, which is a very old and established organisation in science extension?
Sure. The original Royal Society comes from 1600 in England with Christopher Wren, and then it developed, and of course with the settlement of New Zealand, the Royal Society was established in New Zealand in the 1860s, and it was distinctly then a scientific society. But more recently, it's broadened its ambit to include the arts and the humanities. It's a society that encourages the development of knowledge, intellect, and engagement with learning.
So it's very exciting, as I was saying there earlier in the show. This is the first time a person with agricultural science background has been appointed to the role since the 1980s. How significant is that, and what has been the president's role, traditionally background, been going into this?
Sure. The last president in that role was Dr. Ted Bollard, who was the director of the DSIR Division of Plant Diseases, which is the forebearer of the entity that I now work for, the Crown Research Institute of Plant and Food Research. So that's very, very special that his term finished in 1985 and that I take my term up in 2021 as president. I'm president now. So I think it's a recognition of the role that the primary industries play in our socio-economic milieu, and also the role that the Crown Research Institutes and the independent research organisation play in the ecosystem of knowledge and intellect in New Zealand.
You've been involved in science for over 40 years and 300 published papers to your name, Brent. How have you been able to take science and turn it into practical solutions?
Well, that's very interesting, Sarah, because actually I started at the University of Canterbury doing a mathematics degree with some geography in it. So I had this interest in the physical world, but I had a mathematical training, which doesn't really lead you into soil science. But too long to tell the story, but I did end up. And so that opportunity for fundamental science like mathematics and physics in my undergraduate training, I can work in that area of primary production, environment, and understanding the value of land use and the impact of land use on our environment and our economy.
There's also another great piece that Colin's done recently on Kevin Rook, who's recently stood down after a large time in soil conservation. And it really highlighted the shortage of soil scientists and the emphasis on soil. Where do you think we've come from and should be going towards?
Yeah, that's really good, Sarah. Look, back in 2002, 2003, there was a withdrawal of government resourcing into investment into soil science and agricultural research. And we've recovered from that. So we have gone from the outhouse to the penthouse in that sense from 2002. And nowadays, 65% of our export revenues come from agriculture and horticulture. Horticulture in particular is a $10 billion industry. Our land uses are changing. Our requirements for labour, the cultural demands on our land. What is whenua? What is our land for? And how can we use it better in terms of social, economic, environmental and cultural uses? So that's really exciting. And I heard you in the introduction say, and one thing that we're working very closely is not only to get the young people in, but also to get the tamariki, the young Maori, interested, because Maori are large landowners and some of their lands could serve better social, environmental, economic and cultural purposes, and working with them to get them involved in the STEM subjects, the science, the technology, engineering and mathematics, and work in that primary sector. It's a fantastic opportunity.
And the organisation that is a non-profit organisation, the Royal Society Te Aparangi, that you have been elected as president, Brent, how do you believe this is the right organisation for you to carry out your mission to encourage the young tamariki to come through?
Well, because it engages in the arts and the humanities and the social sciences and the biophysical sciences and the geological sciences and I think there's a huge opportunity to bring a wealth of collective knowledge and will to do things better.
And also in terms of science extension, of course, is the transfer of knowledge into more of a palatable way. The Science Media Centre I follow, and from a journalistic perspective, to help us write stories on the latest science developments.
Fantastic.
And footnote, I have not completed a degree yet in my life, so it's quite good to break it down for me so I can break it down for others as well. Do you believe that we're getting better at communicating science?
Oh, we have to, absolutely, Sarah, because the last 2 weekends I've been in Hui at the weekend in Kororo with Maori. It's actually not just about the science, it's about the communication, it's about having the discussion, it's about entering these discussions and listening to what people want and explaining to them in simple terms how their aspirations can be met. So, yeah, it's fantastic. And the Science Media Centre is a gem in terms of how it provides topical comment and independent comment on today's issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in an article I've just recently written for Latitude magazine, I think there was a real focus there on COVID and the attention on science from people wanting to find out how their food is produced, and the affinity with nature has led to that emphasis for science to be more a part of the community as a stakeholder. Brent, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, going forward now, what does your term look like, and what would be some of those key milestones for you to tick off as president?
Well, I think it's that engagement across the breadth of the community of research, science, technology, the arts and humanities, bringing that together because we all need each other, and developing through our educational system, the universities, the science system, the universities in terms of arts and humanities, and bringing it, because it was all about communication. And there are some huge issues we need to address, and that communication one that is absolutely vital. Thinking about vaccines, genetic modification, COVID, climate change, we have to engage in the communication. Otherwise, fake news and conspiracy theories take over, and we must stop.
Love it. Absolutely. Excellent way to end that. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. President-elect of Royal Society Te Aoparangi, also principal scientist currently at Plant and Food, for over 40 years involved in agricultural science here in New Zealand. Brent Clothier joining us from his beautiful beach house at Foxton Beach, where he now resides following lockdown. Now, after the break, and where she currently resides following lockdown, a Kuru lounge, my apologies, barista, Nikayla Knight, has taken the opportunity to pivot in her career when she found herself unemployed following the lack in tourism heading into Dunedin, and is now on a Mid Canterbury dairy farm with Richard and Tammy McDonald. Richard joins us next after Ceres Country to share the journey of Nikayla coming fresh into calving from outside the dairy industry, and his tips on how we can be better employers and more accommodating for Kiwis joining the dairy industry. This is Ceres Country.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here is where to shop for the things you need to live out here. Like electric fencing.
Or horse feed.
Or bee suits.
Children.
Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
Grow, milk, dredge.
Rhea, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Well, COVID-19 lockdown has certainly brought forward the problem with our migrant workers being locked out and unable to be back before the very crucial calving period on our dairy farms across New Zealand. And the skills shortage has been extremely real, especially for Mid Canterbury share milkers David and Tammy McDonald, who have recently found a great new worker in Nikayla Knight, who has come to them from the Dunedin Kuru Lounge. And joining us now is Richard to share the story. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Richard. Of course, front page on this week's Farmers Weekly. It's a great story because as Hosking and those on News Talk ZB said, good luck getting anybody from Air New Zealand to go and milk cows, but you've proved that wrong.
Yeah, hey, we certainly have. It's gone well. Yeah, it's.
Tell us about your property, 880 cows, and whereabouts you are in the operation, particularly staff in a normal year.
Yeah, hey, we're 4 full-time staff, and we've got predominantly relied on migrant workers, and certainly we still appreciate their in our existing team. We've got Andre, Ranger, and Isabel that have been with us from range from 6 to 3 and 2 years, and we certainly appreciate their involvement with us and their skill set, and that does allow us with that skill set that we can be able to take on someone new to the industry. And that's where Nikayla filling that final role for us for calving, and her CV popped up through FarmSource, and it's certainly rolled from there. But
what's it like, Richard, in terms of taking, sort of going out to the job market at the moment? Are you getting flooded with CVs, or is it quite hard to find people at the moment?
We were, I wouldn't say we're flooded, but there was certainly a full range of people looking. Certainly there was more of a Kiwi influence this time round. A couple of years ago, not at all. That was quite pronounced, but yeah, we've certainly there was a range of people there, and there was people within the dairy industry moving sideways. But coming back to Nikayla, she presented herself really well, and it was some great things with her CV and in covering letters specifically that relating to COVID, the loss of job and her desire to try new things and get her hands dirty, essentially. That stood out in her covering letter, and that was the first tick of the box. And that was certainly got the interest up, and followed through up on that. And we always do reference checks, and her various reference checks was glowing. And she's obviously only young and been completely green. I guess from our background too was just thinking that we would like to give someone an opportunity to certainly a Kiwi because of all the circumstances, and she presented herself, and we went from there.
So she was pouring lattes in the Koro Lounge in Dunedin and is now working on a Mid Canterbury dairy farm that your she milk is on. What sort of challenges has she had to overcome, and sort of that attitude you said she presented in her CV coming through to be able to support that sort of enthusiasm and not lose them out the other end?
Yeah, well, hey, it's I guess being completely green, it is all about the attitude and that enthusiasm, and the rest is going to be taught and trained. And I guess we're trying to be that good employer. Dairy NZ has got a wealth of knowledge and resources there that we utilise, and we are trying to look after it, because there is that wee bit of burnout in the dairy industry that we're trying to avoid, and we're really conscious of that. Certainly, she'll predominantly be on a 5 and 2 roster. She's got home by 5 o'clock as well. We're just really conscious of ours, and we're flexible, and we're allowing her to just take the time. And I find I'm trying to be as patient as possible as well. That's probably the biggest key is taking the time, and it's completely new. So there's a lot of why questions, and we give her time to answer those. It's busy, but that's the beauty of my experienced team, that we can certainly allow that time, and certainly throwing them a deep end.
There certainly hasn't been a new problem, the shortage of attracting Kiwi dairy workers. Campaigns like Go Dairy, as well as, of course, Federated Farmers, awesome initiative with the Get Start packs that they're doing. How much more do you think that we can be doing to promote, as you said, being a better boss and those flexible working hours, and keeping that in alliance with, of course, obviously running a profitable business?
Hey, good question. There's some great social media people out there that are really promoting things, and I think that is getting that those good stories out there. I guess this is well out of my comfort zone, but it was put myself forward just to get these stories out. Social media does have its detractions, but it is certainly a way forward. And put me on the spot a little bit.
Do you think that the dairy industry is starting to change in regards to employer behaviour, and we're starting to see that type of attitude shift amongst everyone from share milkers, contract milkers and managers down?
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly believe that. There's just with the age of share milkers and the uptake of these resources that are out there, we're certainly improving that front. And there's just there's some great in Canterbury where we're based. There's new operations, housing wise, rosters. We're very flexible. There's some great opportunities, and that's the biggest thing. Whether it's just across the entire agricultural scene, there's some really great opportunities out there, and this opportunity now, it's giving us a good opportunity for these people. Yeah.
And Nikayla, is she starting to get into the swing of things now and seeing the potential long-term opportunity to stay in the dairy industry?
She certainly is. We've got some systems in place, and she's developing along those nicely. And it's a learning game, of course. We're moving along nicely, but we've certainly, with the reviews, and we have a weekly catch up, a daily catch up, because Nikayla certainly works alongside me. She buddies up with me, and we're bouncing ideas back and forth, but and that knowledge. But we'll certainly move forward on that.
Good on you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Richard McDonald, share milking with Tammy, his wife, in Mid Canterbury, and taking on board some redeploying is the word, from Air New Zealand's Koro Lounge in Dunedin, Nikayla Knight, who lost her job and is now gone dairying. Front page of this week's Farmers Weekly. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be joined by Karen Williams, Vice President for Federated Farmers, going to break down the recent RMA reforms into two parts of legislation. What does that mean for you as landowners? All that coming up next on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce higher quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Well, a law passed in 1991 placed sustainable development at the heart of its law. The Resource Management Act was intended to govern land use, resource development and environmental protection, focusing on a range of environment bottom lines and a desire to control the adverse environmental effects of human activity. And joining us now from Federated Farmers is Vice President Karen Williams to break down the RMA reform of Minister David Parker and what these two new regulations mean. Welcome to the program, Karen.
Good evening, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
A whopping 531-page report, a long night's read.
Probably more than one for a few of us, but yeah, comprehensive, no doubt.
Yeah, and you've got an extensive policy team there at Federated Farmers that do some great work in summarising a lot of it for you. What were some of the key points that stood out straight away that, firstly, was a positive?
Yeah, sure. Look, there's no, I think there's been so much frustration with this piece of legislation by a mixed amount of people. So, it's not only developers, it's submitters, environmentalists. Some of the outcomes have been really perplexing. So Federated Farmers certainly recognise that, it's time for a major overhaul. It's nearly 30 years old, and we need to look at that. But in saying that, though, the concept of sustainable management and protecting our natural and physical resources is still really sound. And when you look at protecting environmental bottom lines and then look at economic, social, cultural and environmental well-beings on top of that, then that part of the Act is still really solid. So we'll sort of go with that. Some of the frustrations, I guess, have always been that the length of time through some of these consent processes have taken, and desiring really good outcomes like with wetland development or on-farm storage, water storage, when we're looking at climate change and needing to be more resilient. Those have been really problematic processes. And also the length of time with plan development. It's of our local regional plan. I first started going to meetings on that in 2013, and I have colleagues who are now in Environment Court mediation, same plan, still going. And look, that's exhausting. It's exhausting for people, communities, and so resource hungry. So totally recognise we needed to do better.
It's interesting. Sorry, that was interesting. It is interesting that Environment Minister David Parker has said that the RMA reform has been a handbrake on economic growth, and yet at the same time the Ministry for Environment is certainly pushing for the environment above all else in a lot of other ways as well. How do you believe the separation into two parts of legislation, pieces of legislation, a Natural and Built Environments Act and a Strategic Planning Act, the split, is going to find that balance of our economic and environment?
Yeah, it'll be challenging. I mean, obviously it's been challenging with the one act, but now we'll have two, so it adds a bit of complexity. It also gives question to what weighting will be given to either of those, and how will that be decided? Will that be decided politically or through the courts with, waiting for more and more case law? So really challenging in that space. Look, in saying that though, we need to look after our environment and protect our environmental bottom lines, but we also need enabling legislation that enables us to do things on our land, and that that in our space, obviously that provides food for us, but it also drives a strong economy, which keeps our people employed and maintains a well-being. So look, Sarah, it's a really delicate balance, and both are key, and both will need solid weighting.
I've just got so many examples in my head where I'll be like, so where would this stand now? Where would this stand now? Like the Ruataniwha Dam, the Waikato River with Auckland's water supply. I mean, there's just so many examples of it. And there's a new Managed Retreat and Climate Change Adaptation Act. I mean, this is talking about sea level rise, but of course, urban development legislation and as you said before, water storage. Does this new split legislation give a pathway for us to adapt quicker to these things?
Well, certainly would hope so. With looking at even like the work we're doing with He Waka Ikanoa and our climate change partnership between government, Māori and industry, it's looking at it about reducing our emissions, but it's also about our adaptation and how we can, farm in a changing environment with less rain or more rain, more extreme events, etc. So I really hope that this legislation will be enabling of that and supportive of us making change.
And of course, the local and regional councils are very much a part of the leader of the law of the Resource Management Act on a daily basis, as well as, of course, the planners and surveyors that support these cases. What was it that you took out of it that will support them, with their very low funding that they do have to support seeing out this act?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's challenging, particularly some of the smaller councils. And here in Carterton, we've got, one of the smaller district councils and a requirement, to prepare a plan now under potentially a different regime. They're cash strapped. COVID has hit hard, particularly in some areas with hospitality and tourism industry. And can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, sorry, like it's glitching. So look, it's a burden for them, and it's not just a resource burden, it's also getting the right capability and staffing. And we'll need to make sure our tertiary institutions are well set up for this, to bring through the kind of capability and expertise we're going to need to assist with a new planning regime.
So where to from here around timeframes for this new legislation to come into effect?
Look, it's still a recommendation, so it's not in a framework yet. We've had three sort of things going on under the RMA simultaneously. So there's been some recent amendments to the Act. There's been this review of the Act and how it's functioning, and also there's been some regulations to do with the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water, the National Environmental Standards, and the stock regulations. So those are all sort of related but distinctly different too. So it's been slightly confusing for people, but we'll just wait and see. We've had the report publicly released, and no doubt MFE will continue working on this. And we'll probably, I'm speculating, we might see a bit more action post-election.
Yeah, absolutely. And saying it's not a Labor Party policy yet, but Parker indicated that they would be seeking to put the new regime in within 3 years. Karen, Vice President of Federated Farmers, thank you so much for taking the time to join us to discuss the RMA reforms. Before you go, on a real side note, because that's what we do on Serious Country, I've got a whole heap of people coming in here. You probably may not have heard at the start of the show, and I was hoping to get a lot of comments, and I've just seen them all pour in. If you were to go to a hologram music concert of anyone dead or alive, I'm just trying to suss out your music taste, who would it be?
Quite like Nat King Cole, actually. That's a bit of a flip back to sort of quite, old time. Yeah. I think, I'd go back to that era.
I can just see you there, Pinot, record on, Nat King Cole. Very classy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's Karen Williams, Vice President of Federated Farmers. I want to get down to your comments. John Williams would say have to be Freddie Mercury. Anthony Roy Orbison, he's a bit old school, he reckons. Jock. Oh, would you believe what Jock's into? Joel, what do you reckon Jock's into?
Please be gangster rap.
Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Michael Ross, Deep Purple, version 2. Ooh. Great work, guys. Thank you so much for joining us in the comments live. As I, of course, swiped the matters that matter most to rural New Zealand. And one that certainly does, that we're going to close the show, is DCAN, so Dairy Companies of New Zealand, Association of New Zealand Executive Director Kimberly Cruth is going to join us. An update on two different areas. The quota fill rates are low despite the CPTPP deal. Canada and Japan up to some interesting tricks. And I'll get her take on the EU and UK deal in regards to our dairy products. All that coming up on Serious Country.
This is Serious Country.
Balance has its own team of innovation specialists. It's our job to lead the way, working with some of the most cutting-edge science and research. We've got partnerships with some of the best suppliers in the world, so our farmers get the very best products for New Zealand farms.
And in every region across the country, the conditions are very different, and farmers and growers' needs are too.
That's why we're always looking for solutions that are just right, like here at our Huntly Service Centre.
And here in Canterbury, we've got a self-service silo, so I can pick up fat when it suits me.
And here in Morrinsville, we've got a world-class mill. That means that we can safely deliver our customers with the freshest, highest quality feed and minerals.
It's about putting the customer first because that's what drives our business.
We've been focusing on faster turnaround of orders. We've got to get the right products to the right places at the right times.
Here in Taranaki, we've got New Zealand's only urea manufacturing plant. It's where we create our premium sustained fertiliser.
We're supplying nationwide and working locally. By getting to know you and what you want to achieve, we can help you get there.
And with the new My Balance platform, Balance has put my farm at my fingertips.
In fact, we offer support in all sorts of ways, sharing the best nutrition practice with farming families across the country. Whether we're talking about animal health, farm productivity,
or looking after our natural environment, sustainability underpins everything we do. We use our local expertise and the latest tools to help farmers and growers navigate the changing regulations, so you can leave your farm in great shape for the future.
And we can be really accurate, avoiding areas like wetlands and waterways with our award-winning Spread Smart tech. It makes the job far safer, more efficient, and gives you the best results.
When you've got access to that kind of know-how, you've got the support you need to make sure you're farming sustainably. It's that kind of thinking that'll keep us going for generations to come.
Together creating the best soil and feed on earth.
Well, 3 of the world's biggest economies are failing to live up to their commitments under the CPTPP trade agreement. And this is about increasing access to their consumer markets for imports of New Zealand dairy products. Joining us now is Executive Director for Dairy Companies Associations of New Zealand, Kimberly Cruther. Good evening, Kimberly.
Good evening.
Now, tell us more about what is going on. Under lockdown, there's a lot of Zoom trade meetings going on, and everybody's trying to keep an eye on all of these economies' trade obligations. What is the thing that's concerning you at the moment about this quotas?
Well, I guess the devil is always in the detail of any deal, and often for trade deals, one of those devils can be quota administration. So under CPTPP, there was an agreement that there would be new access opening for dairy products starting at 53,000 tonnes and expanding, basically doubling over a 15-year time period. Now, that was a lot less than we were hoping for out of the agreement, but it was useful commercial access to have, and it was a slight opening of your big protected dairy markets, so Japan and Canada in particular. What we've seen, however, in the implementation phase is that Japan and Canada, and to an extent Mexico, have put administration arrangements in place over the top of those quotas, so to be able to use and trade under those quotas that act as barriers to trade in themselves. And that's meaning that of that potential trade volume or opportunity that's available, only 40% of it is being used into the Japanese market and only 4% into the Canadian market. So it's an unrealised opportunity for trade for New Zealand, and it diminishes the value of that trade agreement.
So what are you hoping that can be done about this, and how much weight does the WTO or the CPTPP sort of guidelines have emphasis to enforce?
So what we're hoping is that the countries will move to a more straightforward means of tracking the volumes that are entering under those quotas. In the most simple form, quota administration can be an importing country just tracking the product that is crossing the border, and then once it reaches the quota limit, the tariffs revert back up to their outer quota levels. Ideally, there's a bit of notice and transparency around how the utilisation is tracking, so nobody gets caught with product on the water that's going to incur a higher tariff. What these countries have done instead is put in place conditions on who can trade under the quotas, or put in place lottery systems that provide a bit of unpredictability for who can trade. Under the CPT agreement, TPP agreement, there are regular committees of the parties that get together and check in, that basically hold each other to account. That's a mechanism for New Zealand to be able to raise concerns if the agreement isn't being implemented as intended or as committed to. So we're fully supporting the New Zealand government and taking the opportunities to do that. We understand that they met last week and that New Zealand's concerns were represented. Ultimately it is parties holding each other to account, and all sides have agreed and committed to things in this agreement. So there is a common interest in people doing what they say they would do.
Okay, so I suppose it leads me to other countries in particular in the spotlight is the European Union and our ongoing trade negotiations with them. There's a lot that is focusing around dairy and firming up a free trade deal. Where are we at?
I guess the commonality that we're seeing between Canada and Japan and the European Union, and these are all traditional agricultural protectionists, and at the moment they're all, through their actions, holding quite tight to the level of protection that they've had in the past. We've seen there was a recent offer under the EU agreement that was leaked, and it featured really disappointingly low levels of dairy market, or proposed levels for dairy market access. What's really disappointing in there is these are countries who are regularly signing up to statements of commitment globally to remove barriers to food trade, to support open food trade internationally in favour of food security and all of the economic benefits of that. And in this COVID situation, the world really, really needs that. And yet their very pious statements are just not translating into action.
I'd love to understand, how does it work? So you've got yourself and you've got the likes of Chris Claridge from Potatoes New Zealand, who's got a real trade issue on his hands with open trade from the EU dumping fries here. That trade-off between our primary goods to ensure that if we come hard down on fries being dumped, that has a detrimental effect effectively on our dairy products getting a fair go into the EU. How does the MFAT keep a handle on everybody's well-being in a situation like free trade with the EU?
I don't think it's inconsistent. So the WTO's rules framework is seeking to remove barriers and distortions from international trade. There are disciplines that are meant to result in no country putting producers in another country or causing harm to producers in another country. So if the EU is dumping products through the international definition of what dumping is, or if they're inappropriately subsidising and that's resulting in harm to New Zealand producers, then there are mechanisms under the WTO to raise that, to seek solutions to it. And ultimately, if you are removing distortions from the international market, you're seeing less dumping. You're also seeing less trade barriers, which is what our concern has been.
And let's talk about cheese names. You know, the likes of Whitestone Cheese really struggling to know what their future lies with these deals and not being able to use terms such as camembert or brie. where are we at with that in these trade negotiations? And when does it get too hard for us just to walk away and focus on other trading partners?
Where we're at on the cheese names is that it's still a very live issue. The European Union is asking a lot. They're asking for New Zealand producers to give up some cheese names, the use of some names that we've had decades of commercial investment in, that we've supported the development of the global markets for, or that smaller producers in New Zealand have invested substantially in growing their brands for. We are pushing back on that, where we believe that those names are truly common and no longer unique to the European Union. There are some really clear lines that can be drawn. If the EU has been party to a past international agreement where they've agreed, either in fact or by inference, that these cheese names are going to be produced in multiple geographies, then you can't change your name later.
How do you get on with in comparison to wine?
We've actually got similar issues to the wine industry, and in the EU negotiation. So neither of us object in principle to the concept of a geographic indicator. What we object to is the inappropriate extension of that protection to what have become common names. So like the EU is seeking to reclaim and limit the use of feta or Gruyere, they're also seeking to reclaim the grape varietal term in terms of Prosecco as well.
At the same time, we here have paired up with iwi to protect the Māori term manuka, even though it's become worldly known around the world as well. It's an interesting debate.
Yeah, I think it's a complex area of debate. We look at certain markers and for our objection. Have there been international agreements? Is there a really significant history of production in other geographies and trade between geographies? Is there an internationally agreed standard for that product? Things like that denote that this has been given away or accepted as a global name years ago.
And how are we getting on in the UK, our second largest dairy import market? Obviously, everything's still on the table there as well.
Yeah, and not our second largest dairy import market. So the world's second largest dairy import market, but a market that we're largely shut out of. So that negotiation has only just started. And what we're seeking is to have the same trade opportunity into the UK market, which has been enjoyed by large European exporters for the last 40 years. So the UK has been a completely liberalised market for dairy trade for 40 years now, since it joined the EU, just not for our products.
And to think that once upon a time we used to be the little back paddock for the UK's dairy.
Well, and some of the UK consumers remember that and really value it. We often, in the Decan's general email account, receive emails from consumers in the UK just inquiring, saying that they used to consume New Zealand dairy products. They really like New Zealand dairy products. And what's the issue? And of course the issue that they can't access it anymore. The issue is trade barriers.
Kimberly, can I just say on behalf of our audience, thank you for the job that you do. On behalf of all dairy farmers across New Zealand, Nikayla Knight, Executive Director of Dairy Companies Association of New Zealand, joining us there. A great article on farmersweekly.co.nz titled "Quota Fill Rates Low Despite Deal," and this is regarding the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership in Canada and Japan, but great to touch base with Kimberly there about the EU, the UK, and all things trade. If you've been watching Sarah's Country for some time, you'll know I love a good trade talk. Now, that's all we've got time for tonight on Sarah's Country. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. If this is your first time, welcome. Thank you so much for staying to listen or watch wherever you are listening or watching live on Facebook or YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're everywhere, of course, on farmersweekly.co.nz. And if you want to get into podcasts, make sure you check out Sarah's Country and subscribe. All the individual interviews that you may have missed there for some bite-sized content, as well as, of course, the full shows there to dive into. Joel, did you know I was at the Rural Woman National Morning Tea Shout the other day in Wellington with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Minister Damien O'Connor, and I had this lovely lady who told me that she loved listening and watching to Sarah's Country from MPI.
Lovely.
Guess how she liked listening to it?
Oh, was it another Bluetooth one? Or?
No, to put her off to sleep. I was like, thanks so much. No, I'm really chuffed. Anyway, wherever you choose to listen to us, thank you. Please send us an email. I am getting emails every day, sarah@perriermedia.com. I really like hearing from you and your suggestions about guests and issues that you're facing and the matters that matter most to you in rural New Zealand. So that's all I've got time for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night from 7 o'clock. Good night. Go well.
This is Sarah's Country.